Tonight on Newshour, reconciliation and realignment at the CIS Summit in Dushanbe. Leaders from across the Commonwealth of Independent States have gathered to discuss trade, security and the future of regional cooperation. But it was an unexpected moment between Presidents Vladimir Putin and Ilham Aliyev that dominated the opening day. For the first time, Russia's leader publicly admitted that his country's air defences were responsible for the downing of an Azerbaijani passenger jet last December, a tragedy that claimed 38 lives. Well, President Putin offered an apology and pledged compensation, calling it tragic technical failure. President Aliyev thanked him for the gesture while urging full clarity and accountability. Well, beyond the apology, the summit is focused on strengthening collective security, modernising economic frameworks and shaping a new CIS Plus format to widen engagement with neighbouring states. As Tajikistan hosts, it's also seeking to assert its growing regional role. We'll cross live to our correspondent in Dushanbe for the latest, speaking to Aishan Aslan Mamaldi from Baku State University after that for her analysis on what this summit means for Azerbaijan, Russia and the region's future. But first, let's take a look at the meeting between two leaders of Azerbaijan and Russia.
Dear Ilham Aliyev, not long ago, briefly, admittedly, but still, we met in Beijing. Before that, we had spoken several times over the phone. I would like to begin our meeting with the most sensitive topic, the aviation tragedy that occurred in our skies. Even back then, during our first phone conversation, I not only expressed my apologies for the fact that the tragedy took place over Russian territory, but also conveyed my deepest condolences to the families of those who perished. I would like to repeat and reaffirm that, as agreed, we are providing every possible assistance to the investigation. The investigation is nearing completion, and now, generally speaking, we can address the causes of this tragedy, this catastrophe. It was linked to several factors. The first is that a Ukrainian drone was present in the airspace. We were tracking 3 such drones that had crossed the border of the Russian Federation on the night of the tragedy. The second cause lies in technical malfunctions within Russia's air defense system itself. 2 missiles that were launched did not hit the aircraft directly. Had that happened, it would have crashed immediately, but instead exploded, perhaps through self-destruction, a few meters away, roughly 10 meters. Therefore, the damage occurred not primarily from combat fragments, but most likely from debris from the missiles themselves. This is why the pilot perceived it as a collision with a flock of birds, which he reported to Russian air traffic controllers, all of which is recorded in the so-called black boxes. He was also advised, and this too is clearly audible in the recordings, to land in Makhachkala, but he decided to return to his base airport and then to Kazakhstan. Nevertheless, the fact remains. I have now set out for you the reasons for the tragedy. All this is documented following a thorough analysis of the technical data and a second-by-second verification of the black box recordings. We have discussed this issue with you before. Of course, everything required in such tragic circumstances will be done by the Russian side in terms of compensation. and a legal assessment will be given regarding the actions of all responsible officials. Naturally, words of sympathy and moral support cannot resolve the main problem. They cannot bring back those who lost their lives in this tragedy. But our duty, as we agreed from the very beginning, is to provide an objective assessment of everything that happened and to identify the true causes. This, of course, takes some time. To put a final full stop, we will still need a little more time. But overall, I have conveyed to you what I was informed of literally on the eve of our meeting, yesterday or the day before. In fact, even late last night I called Moscow to ask if there were any further details. Everything I know, I have now told you. That is the first part. The second part, I would like to note that despite this, our interests, our mutual interests in many areas coincide and are very close. Above all, this concerns our trade and economic relations. Despite all the nuances associated with this tragedy and other issues arising from it, our trade and economic ties have developed and continue to develop successfully. Last year we grew by around 6%, and this year trade turnover has already increased by more than 16%. That is an excellent result. Thanks to your constant attention to this area, our humanitarian ties have also always remained at a high level. We will talk about this too. We are A, grateful to you for that, and B, certainly determined to do everything on our side to maintain this positive dynamic. And of course, as for the regional situation and the situation on international platforms, our foreign ministries have always worked very closely together. I hope this cooperation will not only be restored, but will continue in the spirit of our relations and our alliance. We never forget this. We remember the treaty that was signed not so long ago, and we will do everything on our part to implement all its main provisions. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Владимир Владимирович. В первую очередь, хотел бы выразить благодарность за встречу.
Thank you very much, Vladimir Putin. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for this meeting. As you mentioned, we had a brief exchange in Beijing, and just 2 days ago, I also called you on the occasion of your birthday. I would like to take this opportunity once again to congratulate you and wish all the very best to you, your loved ones, and the friendly people of Russia. Of course, I would like to express special thanks for the detailed information you have provided regarding the tragedy of last December, when the Azerbaijan Airlines aircraft crashed. We were in contact with each other immediately. As you may recall, on that tragic day I was flying to a meeting in St. Petersburg, and as soon as I was informed of the incident, I called you directly from the plane. We expressed our condolences to one another. I also asked you to convey to our colleagues who took part in that informal CIS summit that for obvious reasons I would not be able to attend. I would also like to thank you for personally keeping this situation under control. As we have repeatedly exchanged views, and as members of our respective teams remain in constant contact, you have been personally overseeing the progress of the investigation. We have never had any doubt that it would be conducted objectively and thoroughly. Therefore, I would once again like to express my gratitude that you considered it appropriate to address this matter at our meeting today. As you noted, not only our trade and economic relations, but cooperation in all other areas has been developing successfully this year. As you mentioned, the trade turnover has shown good momentum. Likewise, in all other directions, there has been no slowdown or regression. On the contrary, The roadmaps we approved together are being implemented successfully.
Карты, которые мы с вами утвердили, они успешно реализуются. Также была проведена.
The Russian-Azerbaijani Intergovernmental Commission also met relatively recently, where the co-chairs held detailed discussions on a wide range of issues, not only in trade and economic matters. And of course, today's meeting is another good opportunity to review our agenda once again. It is quite extensive and positive.
Она у нас достаточно обширная и позитивная. Так что еще раз благодарю.
So once again, thank you for this information, and I am confident that the messages we are sending to our societies today will also be received positively.
Буду также позитивно воспринят.
Спасибо. Спасибо.
Well, let's go now to Fariza Kalamazina, our correspondent in the region. Fariza, good to see you. What's the mood there tonight following that remarkable exchange between Presidents Putin and Aliyev? And also, more broadly, what are the key priorities that are shaping this year's CIS Summit?
Guy, good evening. The mood in Dushanbe today is one of measured surprise and quiet diplomacy following what has quickly become the defining moment of this year's CIS Summit. President Vladimir Putin's public apology to President Ilham Aliyev for Russia's role in the downing of an Azerbaijani passenger jet last December has cast a long shadow over the opening day's discussions. It was an admission many did not expect to hear in such a public setting. The Russian leader called the incident a tragic technical failure, while pledging compensation to the victims' families in the full investigation. President Aliyev responded firmly but diplomatically, thanking Putin for taking responsibility while insisting that full clarity and accountability must follow. The exchange, witnessed by all CIS heads of state, briefly shifted the summit's focus from policy to reconciliation, and it drew quite but noticeable respect from other leaders in the room. And beyond that moment, the summit agenda has been wide-ranging. Security cooperation, counter-terrorism, and regional transport corridors are topping the discussions with an emphasis on stabilizing trade links across Central Asia and the Caucasus. The proposed CIS Plus framework, championed by Moscow, is also being debated. It would expand cooperation to non-member partners while updating the bloc structure to fit modern realities. And Tajikistan, as host, has projected itself as a bridge between the Central Asian and Caucasian members, keen to show that the CIS remains relevant in an increasingly fragmented geopolitical landscape. Delegates say this year's summit feels less ceremonial and more consequential, a forum where long-standing issues are being faced head-on, and in the case of Russia and Azerbaijan, perhaps even healed in real time. Guy, the formal leader session continued into the night, but already this Dushanbe summit has made history, not through new agreements, but through an apology that may reshape regional diplomacy for years to come. Fariza Kalamazina from Almaty, A News.
Well, joining me now to discuss this further is Aishan Aslan Mamadli, a lecturer in the Department of International Relations at Baku State University. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. How significant then is this year's CIS Summit for Azerbaijan's diplomacy in particular?
Hello, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to join you and share my thoughts on this important CIS summit in Dushanbe. Indeed, this year's meeting is not just another diplomatic event. It reflects how regional powers are repositioning themselves and how Azerbaijan continues to act as a constructive and stabilizing force. This summit is very significant for Azerbaijan's diplomacy because it comes at the time when regional dynamics are shifting. The meeting in Dushanbe clearly demonstrated that relations between Baku and Moscow are back on a stable, confident track. For Azerbaijan, it's a chance to strengthen dialogue, expand economic and security cooperation, and reform its role as a bridge between the CIS and the wider region. In that sense, it also sends an important signal that constructive engagement remains the main principle guiding our foreign policy. And speaking of that, the meeting has helped to restore mutual trust and open a new page in Azerbaijan and Russian relations.
And what do you make of the apology? It's something that everybody has been talking about all over the world. We've seen and heard analysts talking about the body language of President Putin, the choice of words themselves, even some people saying that actually if you look at the direct translation from Russian, it's kind of a mooted or qualified apology. People have been arguing about what's behind it. Others saying, well, you know, it was as much of an apology as it's possible for him to have made diplomatically. What do you think President Putin's public apology actually signals about Russia's approach?
Actually, President Putin's public apology was an unusual but very meaningful gesture. It showed that Russia is willing to take responsibility and that it values transparent, respectful communication with its allies. For Azerbaijan, this was a key moment, the main moment. It brought closer to a tragic incident and showed that both sides are capable of resolving sensitive issues through dialogue, not confrontation. And as a result, it also neutralized attempts by certain anti-Azerbaijani and pro-Armenian circuits to manipulate the narrative. So, in essence, this was not only an apology, but also a message that cooperation and trust prevail over misunderstandings.
Yeah, direct, sincere, a sense of closure in some senses. I mean, how does this moment, you think, reshape the tone now of Baku-Moscow relations looking forward?
Indeed, this moment has definitely reshaped the tone of Baku-Moscow relations. So both presidents approached the issue with political maturity, showing that dialogue and realism can overcome even the hardest periods. We now see relations that are more pragmatic, less emotional, and more focused on mutual benefits. And in that sense, the tone matters. It shows that the two countries are ready to cooperate constructively in areas like security, trade, and energy. So I'd say it's not just normalization. It's a renewal of political trust between two sides.
A renewal of trust between two sides. Very interesting indeed. And some of the new elements emerging this year, the CIS Plus being one of them. What is the view in Azerbaijan of that particular proposal?
Azerbaijan views the CIS Plus proposal as a constructive idea that can revitalize the organization. It gives member states the opportunity to engage with neighboring countries and expand cooperation into new fields like technology, like green energy, like logistics. From Baku's perspective, this proposal makes sense as long as it's based on equal participation and respect for sovereignty. And in that regard, we believe any new format must strengthen regional integration, not create new hierarchies. So Azerbaijan supports CIS Plus as a platform for inclusion, openness and fair cooperation.
Fair cooperation indeed. And let's just talk a bit more about that. Do you think Russia is trying to modernize the bloc, or do you see it as an attempt to possibly reassert control through the reforms?
Actually, it seems clear that Russia wants to modernize the bloc rather than reassert control. The geopolitical landscape has changed, and for the CIS to stay relevant, it needs to adapt to modern realities. And Azerbaijan supports reforms that make the organization more effective, flexible and responsive to the needs of all its members. And indeed, we don't need a centralized system. We need a practical one that focused on trade, connectivity, and innovation. Therefore, modernization, not dominance, is the way forward for the CIS.
And many people have been already praising the host country of Tajikistan. What do they get out of that? What does the role of hosting actually deliver to the host country?
Well, by hosting the summit, Tajikistan has shown growing confidence in its foreign policy and leadership. It positions itself as an active player in regional politics, willing to host complex discussions and mediate diverse interests. For Dushanbe, this summit enhances its diplomatic weight both in Central Asia and across the CIS. At the same time, for Azerbaijan, it opens the door to new partnerships in areas like energy, transport, and education, where Tajikistan can play a useful role. So in that sense, it's a good example of how smaller states can contribute meaningfully to big regional dialogues.
Now, whether it's transport links to and from China or the increasing opportunity for collaboration between Azerbaijan and Armenia, or Mr. Trump's, of course, famous discussions and the development of the so-called TRIP corridor. There's been a lot of talk about transport corridors, hasn't there, in the media recently? How central are economic and transport corridors to this year's summit agenda?
Well, transport and economic corridors are absolutely at the center of this summit's agenda. The Middle Corridor and North-South route are not just trade routes. They are strategic arterials connected continents. So for Azerbaijan, these routes mean jobs, investments, influence, but more importantly, they represent stability through connectivity. Indeed, that's why Baku continues to invest heavily in logistics, ports, and rail systems that serve the entire region. As a result, these corridors transform the CIS from a political union into a real economic space of cooperation.
A lot of opportunity for further cooperation, many projects being developed. Finally, I just wanted to ask you about prioritization. With all of this opportunity, where do you think that Azerbaijan should be prioritizing its efforts within the CIS framework?
Looking ahead, Azerbaijan will continue to prioritize stability, sustainable development, and balanced diplomacy. Our goal is to deepen cooperation in energy, logistics, and new technologies while maintaining full respect for sovereignty and equality among partners. In that sense, we see the CIS as a platform that can support regional peace and dialogue rather than competition. So actually, Azerbaijan's approach has always been pragmatic and future-oriented. It's about turning regional challenges into shared opportunities. And that's exactly what we aim to do moving forward.
Shared opportunities. Ayşem, we thank you very much indeed for joining us and for giving us your analysis.
Thank you for having me. And I want to add something that indeed this summit shows that even after difficult moments, constructive dialogue can lead new beginnings. And I always tell to my students the same thing, that dialogue and understanding can solve more than confrontation ever could. And this summit has just proved that once again. And that's the real lesson for diplomacy and perhaps for life in general.
Fantastic. And this particular dialogue sadly needs to come to an end for now, but hopefully it won't be the last time we speak to you. Thank you again for your analysis.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So the Dushanbe summit has delivered both diplomacy and contrition. Putin's public apology may mark a turning point in relations with Azerbaijan, while discussions on reform and security continue. The challenge now, turning statements into substance across the CIS region. Well, that is all for this edition of Newshour from all of us here at A News. Thanks for being with us.